Hi there! Have you ever wondered what it's all about? If you're selling something, you need to make sure that people are focused exactly on what you're trying to sell. That's called branding, and it's all about positioning your product in a certain way so that it's very clear to your audience, to your market, to your prospects, what it is, who you are, and how it benefits them. We're going to learn a little bit about that in a moment as we have a special guest here on this week's version of the State of Greater Western New York Report, which is brought to you by...
Each week, our community makes history. Each week, you make history. And each week, there's only one source to turn to for the first take on history. You know what that is? Subscribe to the Sentinel right now to discover the history being made in your own backyard. The Mendon Honeoye Falls Lima Sentinel. More than just your news, it's your history. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the State of Greater Western New York Report. Join us each episode as we discuss fantastic topics ranging from history to science to the strange and the wonderful, as well as the treasured spirit with which our region has infused America. We challenge you to consider all things Greater Western New York, from our region's very beginnings to how it inspires, how it empowers, and why it is so admired. Here's the host of the State of Greater Western New York Report, Chris Carosa.
Hi there, everybody, and welcome to this week's version of the State of Greater Western New York Report. I'm Chris Carosa, your host. As the announcer just mentioned, and each week we're bringing you something fantastic about the Greater Western New York region. This week we're going to focus on some business aspects, and for that we have Glenn Clark, who is a branding expert, who's going to tell us, well, first, Glenn, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Chris, what an awesome intro that was. Thank you. And you're not too far from me, are you? I think we're just a few miles apart. You're over in Mendon, right? I'm here coming at you live from Honeoye Falls, my home office where I turned to at the start of the pandemic and never went back. I had an office not far, actually across the street from you in the hamlet of Mendon, and left that and started a home office here in March 2020. And I don't think I'll ever go back. I really enjoy working from home. Anyway, I'm off topic already.
That's all right. That's all right. No, you're telling a little bit about yourself. That's what we want to hear.
No, I'm the individual behind crafting a brand. I help small businesses connect with consumers by telling their story, in helping consumers understand what's different or unique about your brand. I do a lot of work with craft beverage producers, beer, wine, spirits, and cider. As you know, there are a lot of those around, especially breweries. It seems like they're popping up on every corner. So if you were opening a brewery, we would sit down and the first question I would ask you would be the same question that a consumer would think. Why should I visit your brewery when there are 10 other breweries nearby? And so when we work on a brand, we work on understanding what a business is all about and how it's unique and what's different about it and what the unique experience is, and then telling the world about that through marketing.
So explain.
That's what I do.
Yeah, explain. A lot of people out there, they understand marketing, they understand sales, but they don't necessarily understand branding. So what does branding mean, and how do you then integrate it into your marketing? Well, let's start with what does branding mean? That's an easier question to start with.
So let's look at a visual, Chris. Let's pull up a slide from Main Street Coffee Shop. Yeah, because branding oftentimes is branding is visual a lot of the time. A lot of times, the first time we interact with a brand is when we see something, whether it's a logo or a website or a social media page. So I actually brought some visuals. I think it's helpful to show and not as opposed to just telling about it. So let's say I'm going to tell you actually a true story. But let's say there was a coffee shop in Honeoye Falls, and this goes back to 2003 when I first started my business, and there was a coffee shop, and I'm going to show you what it was in just a minute. But let's just say that this coffee shop owner was going to name his shop the Main Street Coffee Shop, and let's say that this was his logo. Okay, it wasn't, but I'm using this as an example. So let's say you're driving through town and you want to get a bite to eat, or you want to get a cup of coffee. And Chris, what if you saw this logo? What if
I'd
you saw
say,
this logo? It has
well,
some
it's a
issues,
coffee
doesn't it?
shop on Main Street.
And it's got some issues, doesn't it? It has some issues in terms of what I'm seeing here, in terms of, the overall appearance, and you kind of wonder how attractive is that. And it also has an issue in terms of the name of this coffee shop, because if one goal of a business is to be unique and different from its neighbors, doesn't every main street have its own coffee shop, right? If you looked at small towns across America, I'll bet there are a whole bunch of main street coffee shops. And so when we think about a brand, we think about, if we're starting a business. And I know a lot of people in the audience, they're probably entrepreneurs and small business owners. You want to put your business out there to the world in a way that is unique and distinct and not like everybody else. So this particular coffee shop that was opening up offered so much more than just coffee. It had all sorts of. They had a chef who specialized in farm to table food, in organic breads, and meats that came from a nearby butcher. And they had all sorts of exotic coffees from around the world. And they had a small farm outside of town, and they had chickens and cows and pigs. They had, as a matter of fact, they were going to serve the dairy product from their two cows at the coffee shop. So that's a pretty cool story, isn't it? And I might not get all of that if I drove by and saw this sign with this logo on it and this sort of generic sounding Main Street coffee shop. So I helped them bring the correct brand to life. And if you want to pull up this next slide. So Main Street Coffee Shop never existed. It was Two Cows Coffee and Farm Market. And if you'll flip through, there's a couple more slides here that show this brand. There you go. That was the window decal. So if you were driving by and you saw this signage, you saw this coffee card, you saw the window decal, I'll bet you'd be interested, right? I bet that might encourage you to stop your car and check it out, because they created a brand that was unlike anything else. And when I see that and when I read it and I think about what it could possibly be like when I step through the door, my imagination comes alive before I've even stepped through the door. And so we talk about a brand as putting your story out to the world through the internet, through a window decal, through a sign, whatever it is, and telling that story in a way that is interesting and imaginative and creative. There's so many businesses out there, so many small businesses and entrepreneurs, especially post-pandemic. A lot of people quit their jobs and they started a new business. And if you're competing with them, I can tell you the person obviously has to have a great product, but the person who tells their story in the way that gets your attention the best is going to be the business that wins out in the long run. So branding really is how you put your story out to the world and how you differentiate yourself or position yourself in a way that's unlike anyone else. Let's talk about positioning. That's a phrase that you may have heard that's used in branding. Here's what positioning is. I want you to think about two different, let's talk about coffee again. Let's think about Starbucks coffee. Okay? I want you to envision that. All right, now let's think about Dunkin' Donuts. All right? You've got a picture in your mind about that. And now let's think about Maxwell House. Maxwell House coffee. Okay, three different brands. They all sell the same thing. I understand coffee tastes different, but they all sell the same thing. They all sell coffee. I am certain that each of you, I'm certain that none of you had an issue positioning each of those three brands in different places in your mind. So positioning is taking the same product and creating a brand, Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, that is completely unlike the other. There is no confusion when you step into a Starbucks, when you step into a Dunkin' Donuts, where you are. Or even in your mind, you have no problem putting them each in a different place
So,
because they've
Glenn,
done such a great job in positioning themselves.
what I'm picturing, and literally I'm picturing, when you give me those names, I'm picturing their logo. I'm picturing the layout. Well, not so much in Maxwell House, but at least in the retail establishments, I'm picturing the layout, the atmosphere. So it's not just say a two-dimensional story. Branding is really three or maybe more dimensions. You know,
No
talk to us
doubt.
a little bit about that, all the elements that go into branding, so that people see that, you know, we're talking about a wide spectrum of things that need to be addressed if you want to properly brand your product.
Yeah, yeah. Let's. I have another visual I'd like to share. Um, could you? I've got a visual called "How Your Customers Form Opinions About You." It's a consumer touchpoint wheel. There we go. Uh, so after this slide, Chris is going to put a blank consumer touchpoint wheel up. I hope you take a picture of this slide with your camera because this is a great exercise to help you think about how your customers see you. So, one of the problems that a lot of small businesses have is they don't see their business from the consumers or the customer's point of view. They don't know what it feels like to be on the other side of the counter engaging with your business. So, let's talk about a craft brewery. Okay, this is actually a slide I used at a workshop recently. So we sat down with that team and we filled each of these spokes of the wheel in with different ways that the customer experienced or formed an opinion about the brewery. So that's I said experience. I really want you to think about this is how are the ways that customers form an opinion about you because they're going to walk out of your business and they're going to tell their friends and their relatives and their spouses and their coworkers about their experience. Okay, you have the responsibility and the ability to control how the customer perceives your business. So you have the ability to take care that when I pull in, I'm at the top right corner of this slide. When I pull into your brewery, you've got a driveway and the exterior building is and it's flat and there are potholes, okay? That's branding. When I think about the outside of my building or the signage out front, that's branding. Your website, your social media, your beer labels, right? I can't try your beer at Wegmans. That's not legal. I can't pop that open and try it. I have to rely on that label to express my brand. My name and logo. How important is it that Two Cows Coffee and Farm Market was never named Main Street Coffee Shop? The type of music being played when I walk into a brewery or a bookshop, I'm going to hear that music and I'm going to form an opinion. And that opinion is, hey, these people get me, right? I love listening to this kind of music while I browse the bookshelves, or I can't wait to get out of here. I can't stand that music. So, music. is branding. Branding is all of these choices, these touch points.
Okay, well, let's.
Opinion.
Oh, there we go. You were breaking up there for a second, Glenn. So let's take a break right now, and when we come back, we'll learn more about branding, and maybe branding beyond the retail sector and how you might see it in your everyday life in and around, say, the greater Western New York region. You're listening to the State of Greater Western New York report. We'll be back right after these messages.
Each week, our community makes history. Each week, you make history. And each week, there's only one source. Through the mists of time, nature and man have both created and buried treasures beyond the imagination. With the ages, these riches slowly dissolve into mere myths until they are forever forgotten. But there are those brave souls who tirelessly cling to the truth, ever seeking to discover the undiscovered, to reveal what has always been there, to uncover the hidden gems of a land thought forsaken but loved by millions. 50 Hidden Gems of Greater Western New York. Discover the secrets in your own backyard. Buy your copy now at 50hiddengems.com.
Welcome back to the State of Greater Western New York report. I'm here, Chris Carosa, with Glenn Clark, who is a branding expert. Glenn, talk to us more about branding in the sense of what it means in a non-retail environment. Can you think of an example? It could even be a national example that most people would recognize where they've effectively branded, say, their product or their concept or their idea, something that's a little less tangible than, say, a retail situation.
Yeah, how about let's talk about the one of the most famous travel brands in all of the world, which we here in New York State happen to see all of the time, Chris. You know where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I'm thinking I Love New York, maybe? I don't know. Is that it? We got a frozen Glenn there. So I hope that he can hear us. There we go.
Am I back?
You're back, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So how many people around the world think that New York State is New York City and maybe not much else, right? So New York State recognized that many years ago and created Milton Glaser was a designer in Manhattan, and he literally sketched I Heart New York on a napkin, and that went on to become one of the most recognizable brands in the world. And that logo was a point of entry, right? It was an introduction that would spark your interest, right? Catch your eye and open the door for a conversation to happen. That was, oh, by the way, there's an awful lot to see in New York State north of New York City. And so there's an example of a brand. When we think about a travel or tourism, if you think about branding, even Western New York, right? One of I think the most important thing that a travel or a tourism marketer can do in Western New York is first undo what is unfortunately a perception that there's nothing here, right? It's the Rust Belt. That's a dying region. There's nothing Uh,
Okay, Glenn, we're skipping on your audio again. So yeah, Glenn is starting to talk about.
we have to
Oh, yeah, it looks like we're having some audio problems with Glenn.
undoing a perception, undoing a perception,
Let's do this. Let's
or repositioning, if you will.
Glenn, I don't know if you can hear me, but you're coming in and out on the audio. So why don't you try logging off and logging back in again? So that might clear things up. And in the meantime, I will just talk to our listener out there. So Bob, how are we doing? You can chat, Bob, if you want on there we go. Audio problems with me too. Interesting. Okay, so I apologize for those who are listening live who are experiencing audio problems. For you on the playback, though, you will be able to see this without any audio problems because it's coming out of the studio just fine. It could be our platform that is generating the problem right now. So the Glenn is back, and let's see how he is. So how are you now, Glenn? Are you
I'm good? How's that?
Okay, much better, Glenn. Yes. I'm seeing, so one of our live listeners is saying he's also experiencing a broader audio problem, perhaps dealing with broadband, but within the studio, everything is now fine, which means on the playback, you'll be okay. So we're talking about the greater Western New York region and maybe how to brand that and some of the challenges in branding that. You mentioned that there's this perception of a rust belt, things like that, and I could attest to that personally with one of the products that I did, which is a Greater Western New York type-based product. When it was previewed by the New York Times, it mentioned rusted steel mills, dilapidated grain elevators. If you're from Buffalo, you know what I'm talking about. But that's a perception that Western New York has had for a long time. That may be changing, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about that or a little bit about what could be done to change that.
Yeah. So there are, I think it's really a collective effort. Nobody changes a perception about a region or a part of a country overnight or through a single effort. I Love New York. That campaign has been running since the 1970s, and there's always work to do. But I think it's really a collective effort. By that I mean all of the individuals who have a business that attracts people from outside of the region. Tourism-based business, wineries, hotels, entertainment. It's really a matter of the collective effort of telling people things that they don't know about the region, or we live in a visual world, showing them pictures or video that will over time change the perception. I love Go Bills. I'm a huge Bills fan, but you got to love when they're on national TV, which is happening more and more these days because they're so good. But there are oftentimes community profiles or even, the video B-roll of places in and around Buffalo that frankly just look awesome. People in Kansas City or the West Coast see that on a national broadcast and they think, wow, that Buffalo looks pretty cool. That's not what I thought it was all about. Right. So it's little things like that over and over that over time can change the perception about what a region is all about. Cleveland has done a great job with that as well, with their, again, leaning on their sports teams and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, right? And you get people to come to your region and they have a fantastic experience. And, over time, that's how things begin to turn around.
We got a message here from one of our watchers that are saying that he's always thought the best parts of Western New York were the rural areas, agricultural and natural scenery. And I've interviewed people on this show who have talked to associates who are from New York City. In fact, one of them, I think, you mentioned two cows earlier. One of them mentioned how one of her coworkers from New York City wanted to know where this person was from. She said, "Oh, about 20 miles south of Rochester, where the farms are, where the cows are." And the person from New York City said, "Oh, going to see a cow. That's on my bucket list of things to do." So it's like, what? But so there's that difference. And to the point now, I like your idea, or I like your mention of the Bills. The Bills definitely regionalized themselves going back maybe over 20 or 30 years now to become more of a Western New York team when they were doing their practices at St. John Fisher College in Rochester, having done previously from Fredonia. So they were well outside of Buffalo where they did the summer practices, and that helped extend that brand. In a similar way, if we were going to take an I Love New York approach, let's call it an I Love Western New York approach, who do you think ought to take the lead in doing that? Is there a municipal type group, or an association, or a group of associations that are perhaps best positioned to do this? Who do you think might take the lead?
We have a very effective network of what are called tourism promotion agencies, or TPAs, throughout New York State. I believe every county has one, and that is kind of overseen or managed by Empire State Development and their funding as well. And that was a way, and actually that's actually Empire State Development is I Love New York. So that strategy is all about, let's take budget, for instance, taking budget and distributing it to each county and letting those who understand the county best work with those funds to attract people to their county or to their region. And we all know that people don't travel by county, they travel by region, or they travel by interests. But that particular system, for better or for worse, is set up so that funds go to individual counties from New York State. And actually, a lot of them do work together. They do collaborate to name or to brand their region, right? Greater Niagara region is how many counties? Probably 6 or 7 different counties.
Right.
Country Byways of Western New York is 3 counties in Western New York.
Yeah, the Finger
Hudson
Lakes
Valley.
region. I know that they've done it.
Finger Lakes region, right? All of those.
Yeah.
So that is happening. That has been happening for many years now, and that's your boots on the ground, your local tourism people who live in these regions, getting together and collaborating to bring people to tell the story and the stories of each region.
Yeah, we got another comment coming in about our state parks, how this person's traveled around the country and is realizing more and more how much superior our state parks are, New York State parks are, to many other parks across the country. And most of the parks here are state parks. They're not national parks.
Yeah. No, we sure do know how to complain about upstate New York when we live here, don't we? It kind of burns me because it's a pretty cool place to live. It's a pretty awesome place to live in terms of our, the natural beauty, the quality of life, the lack of traffic. There are no hurricanes. There are no earthquakes. When global warming, or when we run out of fresh water, we'll be the last man standing here with our Great Lakes.
Right.
But it's an incredible region to live in, and there are a lot of people who work hard every day to tell that story. Yeah. We had visitors from South Carolina a few weeks ago, and we spent a day in the Finger Lakes. We drove around, and they were blown away. They said, "This is so incredibly, beautiful, and the wine. This wine is so good. I heard New York State wine was just sweet white wines. Well, our Rieslings are world class. We also have fantastic red wines and dry wines. But the Western New York, the Finger Lakes brand is alive and strong. And there are a lot of people, including myself, who wake up every day and try to share that story with the outside world.
Well, speaking of sharing, Glenn, what do you have that people might be able to, and I know the answer to this because I actually am a
Oh,
subscriber. Tell us about your newsletter.
yeah. I have there you go. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please subscribe to my newsletter. It's called Three Things Every Thursday. You can subscribe at threethingseverythursday.com. And I share three different stories every week about marketing, branding, technology, travel, tourism, economic development, so on and so forth. Chris, you get that newsletter. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a great newsletter. It's not a salesy newsletter. It actually contains a lot of good, I will almost call it trivia information. I like discovering things that I don't know, little tidbits of factual information. And Glenn includes that in his newsletter. Yeah, he talks about the three things every week, but it's always something that's interesting. And I would encourage you, even if you don't have a product to sell, maybe to look at it just to get some knowledge. But I'm sure that you probably are affiliated with an organization that could use some uplift in terms of branding. Glenn, thank you very much for being a part of today's show. It's always great to have somebody right across the street, sometimes literally, to tell us something that a lot of people want to know. And again, if you want to be part of the live audience where you can ask questions, then just go to stateof.greaterwesternnewyork.com and you can sign up for the invitation form. You'll be invited every Thursday morning to the Thursday noon live show where you can ask questions and do comments. If you can't make that, the show's always put in our archives on our site, stateof.greaterwesternnewyork.com, and it's rebroadcast on our Facebook page and YouTube channels every Sunday at 1:30. So you can participate in that way too. Glenn, thank you very much for being a part of today's show, and everybody else, thank you for listening. We'll see you later.